In the last video, we looked at all the articulations, and in this video, we're going to look at using the Keyswitch window as a means of combining the articulations into one performance, the way a real player would switch playing styles according to the part that he's playing. Now, I've got the production preset loaded in for violins 1 and 2, and the Keyswitch window is available in the production version of the presets. And the idea here is that we set the different articulations that we want in these 6 fields, and then here we set which keynote is going to trigger switching the articulations. Now, we can call up the articulations via the menu here, and I'm going to call up spiccato for this second slot over here, and for this one I'm going to call up portamento. These are the 3 articulations that I want to use for this little part that I have performed up. Now, we can set the trigger notes here one of 3 ways. We can double click and type in the note. I'll type in C1, for example, since that's the one I want to use. Or we can scroll just up and down like that. Or we can type in the MIDI note number if you know it. For example, I'm going to type in, I believe it's 38 for D1. There we go. And I'm going to leave this one at D1. So 3 ways. We can mouse scroll, we can double click and type in on our QWERTY keyboard, or we can double click and type in the MIDI note number. So I've got these 3 different articulations set on these 3 different slots. I'm not going to bother with these for now. Now we have some dynamic control here. Basically, when we're playing with these production presets, we can have the dynamics controlled by velocity, which is the default way of controlling dynamics that we're used to when we're working with MIDI keyboard controllers. And what that means is the harder you press the key, the louder it's going to trigger, and the quieter you press, the quieter it's going to trigger. For example, versus that's all based on how hard I'm pressing. Now, we have minimum maximum range, so we can limit the dynamic range. If I want to hit quietly and make sure I don't get below, let's say 50 in this example, then no matter how quietly I play my key, that's the quietest volume I'll get. So you can scale the range over there, and the curve basically meaning the response of how hard you hit your keyboard and where it falls within the range that you have set here. And the default is wide open. Now, the alternate mode here is to switch to mod wheel. And in this case, using the modulation wheel will be what controls the dynamics. And that's great for controlling dynamics for sustained notes, for example. So in that case, I have one sustained note and I'm controlling the dynamics with the modulation wheel, which is something you can't do when you're working with velocity, since that's tied to the note on event. So 2 different ways of controlling the dynamics. So with these set up, let's listen to this little part that I have programmed up. And right now there's no key switch notes. We're going to hear it all with the legato articulation. Let's just play back and trigger this one. There, I just hit a C1 on my keyboard. So that's what we're going to listen to it with. Now you'll notice I have some notes overlapping, some aren't, and that's because of how I want the different articulations to trigger the notes. Now I've got my Keyswitch notes programmed up here. I just used the pencil tool and drew them in by hand, and these are basically a series of C1s, D1s, and E1s, and I have them all muted, so let me just unmute them now. I'm going to select them all and unmute them. And now we can play back, and you'll see as it's playing back, it's going to switch articulations. You can see with this green dot, which is the active articulation, and we'll be able to see and hear the performance using these different playing styles. So you can see when the key switch notes happen, the articulations change. And it's a good idea to make sure that the key switch notes are slightly before the note on events. A few ticks before is fine. I'm zoomed in close here so we can't really see it, but where it needs to be, there are a few ticks early. Now, let's say I want to double this part. I want to have it play an octave lower with violas. I'm going to do that. Let me just close this editor, and I'm going to Option drag this down to basically copy the instrument and the region. There it is there. Put it up here. And now what I'm going to do is, I'll just name this violas. I'm going to open up this instrument and we're going to change it to violas and just reset our key switches. So let's open up the browser here. And in Session Strings Pro, I'm going to go to violas. There we are. I'll just drag that in. And there are the violas. So the key switches aren't set. Let's do that now. And in the key switch window, all the trigger notes by default are the same, but if you're working with cellos or basses, they might be an octave lower. So let's set what we want here. I'm going to set the spiccato over there, and I'm going to set the portamento over there, because that's what I want. Hide that for a moment. And now in this new part, I'll just name it violas. I want to transpose them down an octave, but I can't just transpose the whole region down, because then my trigger notes, my key switch notes will get transposed as well. So instead, I'm just going to select all of these notes like that, and I'll transpose them down. And the key command in Logic Pro X is Option Shift with the down arrow to put them down an octave. So let's bring that up, and we should hear both parts playing now, and we'll hear it doubled an octave lower. And we're looking at the violas now. So that works nicely. One of those portamentos didn't work so well on the viola right around the middle here. I can go in and change that one articulation in the viola if I want to. But that's an idea of how to get started working with key switches and multiple articulations in Session Strings Pro. See if more in the next video.